Good morning, everybody. There's a few people I know here. Good morning. I have been to the Canaan Society a few times in the past when I lived in Franklin. I'm in Brentwood now. It's really no excuse, but I don't get up this early for breakfasts usually. I'm up this early every day doing my blog that I do, but I'm glad and delighted to be here. I'm vice chair. I'm chairman of the board of Hope4America, a ministry that Walt Wilson and I co-founded a little over a year ago, 17 months ago now. We are a continuation, or maybe an offshoot, of a global mission organization called Global Media Outreach, which Walt founded 4 or 5 years ago. Walt Wilson is a guy that I met 5 years ago. By the way, I'm going to bring up the CEO, Jacques Aebli, in a little while to tell you a whole lot more about the ministry. I'm just giving you a little bit of backstory. I met Walt Wilson 5 years ago when he moved to the Grove in Chapel Hill. His ministry, Global Media Outreach, was in Dallas, and he was commuting. Walt was 81 years old and was the most interesting man I ever met. In fact, Larry and I have already collaborated. I'm going to be writing a book about Walt because his life is so amazing. Walt passed away on September 17th, graduated to heaven, but the ministry lives on. He's a guy born in the late 30s, dropped out of high school in New York City because he was a street kid, joined the Marines, found the Lord in the Marines, knew about him, let me say. His wife, who was his childhood girlfriend, and also a street kid in New York City, led him to the Lord, and that was after he got out of the Marines. Right. And then he spent 40 plus years in Silicon Valley with the likes of Fairchild Semiconductor and Apple. He was director of operations of Apple, working directly with Steve Jobs. After Steve Jobs left the first time, after he was railroaded out, Walt left with him and stayed in the consulting business, and is one of the real pioneers in the internet digital space. Jacques is going to give you a little bit more history about Walt. I just want to say that when I met him, we became close friends, joined his board to help spread the gospel across the world, which has been done 2.7 billion times in the last 20 years. And over 300 million people have accepted Christ. He's the greatest evangelist nobody has ever heard of. So he's meeting a lot of people in heaven right now. And we spun off in July 23 a new ministry called Hope4America.us. Walt had a vision to concentrate our efforts in sharing the gospel with America, because America was broken, still is. And the only cure for that is Jesus. So we began our ministry. Walt helped fund it. We are 501c3, and our mission is to share the gospel using Google Ads and then boosting them with revenue. And again, the handout that you have is going to go really deep, and it's got an action report of our results so far. Jacques is going to go over that. I want to just finish with a couple of things. Walt, as he had been in the industry for so many years, he actually wrote a book prior to his first nonprofit start, and it was called The Internet Church. And he was talking about how the internet was going to be the new Roman road for evangelism. So if you think about the Roman roads built over 2,000 years ago, they were built by the military so that the Romans could quickly get their military up to their vast empire. But guess what happened in Acts when the Christians were sent out? They all used the Roman road to help spread the gospel in a quicker way. And Walt says the digital highway is like the old Roman road. Again, Jacques going to tell you his vision that he had in 2004 about setting up his first mission. But I want to read a few quotes because Walt has said, people ask him all the time, is the internet in the Bible? So here's a couple of scriptures that I want to just leave with you. One starts in Genesis 1, 3, and 4. You don't have to get very far into the book. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw that light was good. Genesis 1:10, God saw the dry ground, land, and the waters, sea, and God saw that it was good. So he called forth light, and he created land, and the sea, terra firma, and water. The land is largely sand, and the fancy name for sand is silica. Among sand's distinguishing features that there's a lot of it. It's found everywhere all over the world. It's the second most abundant element on the Earth's crust. And if sand is the second most abundant, what you might wonder is the first? Oxygen. By creating land and sea, God made water. Water is H2O. These are the elements that make up silicon chips. The material for what we see in technology and what we don't see, frankly, because there's bits and bytes flying through this room right now, comes from the early beginning of the creation. God created it, knew it was going to be available, and we've been blessed to find the use of it. And then the last verse that I want to read to you is in Revelations. Okay. Revelations 4:6, I think. I forgot the reference number. 14:6. And it says, then I saw an angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who dwell on the earth, to every nation, tribe, and language. The Bible is defining bits and bytes flying through the air. That's according to Walt Wilson. It's a pretty interesting concept of using technology and the things we cannot see to bring people to Christ. Jacques Aebli, our CEO, is going to go over our brochure. Thank you so much for allowing us to be here. We look forward to getting to know you and you get to know us.
Thanks, Pat. Before I get started, I want to thank Larry and Wes and Andy for having us in today. This is called Breakfast with the Brothers, right? Okay, we're so excited to be here. I'm going to talk about Hope4America.us, and it's a ministry about people who live for Jesus and love people. And if you live for Jesus and you love people, you have to tell those people about Jesus, and that's exactly what we do. And Pat talked a little bit about Walt Wilson, the founder. Again, Walt grew up in New York. He was in the Marines. Pat and I were actually in the Air Force. How many veterans do we have here? Got a few. Pat, Walt, and I used to always get in arguments as to who was the most brave, because we flew jets built by the lowest bidder, and Walt had to use a gun with bullets built by the lowest bidder. So we really never figured out who was the most brave, but it was some pretty stimulating conversations. So Walt was in the Marines, and he did go on to a 45-year career as a Silicon Valley tech exec. He was hired by Steve Jobs in the early days of Apple and went on to a very significant position at Computer Sciences Corp. When in the mid-1990s, Walt was called into the president's office at CSC, and he was asked a question. He said, "What do you know about the internet?" And Walt said, "Well, I think I know about as much as anybody does, and that's nothing." And so they said, "Well, we would like you to go to MIT to an internet conference where they're going to talk about the internet." So Walt went. Again, it was the mid-1990s. And it was a trip that changed the destiny of his life. He was in a whiteboarding exercise, and the Holy Spirit spoke to Walt and said, "I want you to take my gospel and put it on the internet." So Walt went home. He retired from CSC, and he went around the country talking about this vision that God gave him. And one of the first people that Walt spoke to was Bob Buford from Halftime. Now, Walt was on Bob's board, so he went to Bob and he said, Bob, God gave me this vision about putting the gospel on the internet. And Bob Buford said, Walt, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. It won't work, people won't go for it, and it's too expensive. But Walt continued to go around the country talking about this vision, because it was at that conference his life was changed from one of focusing on success, and he was very successful, to one of significance, which Walt defined as living for Jesus and loving people. So Walt went around the country talking about the vision. Bob Buford called him a few years later and said, I'm going to the McClellan Foundation in Chattanooga, and why don't you go with me and share that lame brain idea that you've got? So Walt did go with him, and he spoke at a luncheon about the vision. And after the lunch, one guy came up to him and said, I like what you had to say, and I want to help you. And that was Paul Eshelman of the Jesus Film Project. So Paul took Walt to Orlando, introduced him to Steve Douglas of Campus Crusade for Christ, and they agreed to help him and start the ministry, Global Media Outreach. Both Steve and Paul were on Walt's first board of the ministry. Now, this was in 2004. Also in 2004, Walt got a call from a producer in Hollywood, and they said, we're about to release a movie, and we would like to have some evangelists come in and give us their opinion of the movie. So Walt went out to Hollywood, watched the movie, and it was The Passion of the Christ. Mel Gibson got up and said, does anybody have any questions? And Walt said, I do. Would you mind if I took some of your thematic elements and used the name of the movie to create a website called thepassionofthechrist.com? Mel Gibson said, I'm a movie maker. You're an evangelist. Use what you want. If anybody contacts you, tell them to call me. So Walt went back and started thepassionofthechrist.com. Now, admittedly, I'm sure there were a lot of people that went to the website looking for tickets, looking for something, to find out something about the movie. But what they got was a 4-step gospel presentation and an opportunity to say a prayer of salvation. And that year, 20,000 people went to thepassionofthechrist.com, saw a gospel presentation, and gave their life to the Lord in 2004. So if we fast forward to 2022, as Pat alluded, millions upon millions of people have entered the kingdom because of Global Media Outreach, the first ministry that Walt founded. But in his study, Walt received another word from God in 2022, and that was, I want you to tell America that Jesus has something better for them. So Walt went to his board at Global Media Outreach. He said, we need to start focusing more on America. The board didn't go along with it. He said, we're doing fine globally. It's too expensive in America, and we want to stay with the strategy that we have. So Walt stepped down as chairman of the board and left the ministry that he founded in 2004 to start Hope4America.us. Pat and Walt co-founded that in July of 2023. I joined as CEO in September of 2023, and we ran our first campaign on November 1st of 2023. And our campaigns are based about help for a struggle. So the first struggle we thought about was, let's come out with help for loneliness. It was November, Thanksgiving, December, Thanksgiving and Christmas are pretty lonely holidays. And actually, half the country will admit they're lonely. So we thought this is a pretty good pond to fish in. And so we just ran a campaign on Google, help for loneliness, or find hope for loneliness. Well, the first week we had 338 people click on a Google ad, go to a gospel page, and see a presentation. And 18 of them gave their life to the Lord the first week. So January 1, we decided this past January, we're going to roll out more campaigns. So we, in addition to help for loneliness, we had help for PTSD, help for fear and anxiety, help for anger, help for addiction, a number of pages that would show hope for struggles that people were going in. And if you look at the insert inside this brochure, there's a table, and it shows the results that we've had this year since we launched these struggles January 1. And what it shows you is that almost 360,000 people have gone to a gospel page looking for hope. And 50,000 Americans have got to the bottom of that page, said a prayer of salvation, and given their life to the Lord. That's a 14% conversion rate. We share the gospel for 69 cents, and our ROI is over 20%, meaning for every $1,000 that we're investing in Google ads, we see 200 people that say a prayer and give their life to the Lord. It's really a pretty extraordinary ROI. So there are 30 million Americans that you're never going to meet in church. They're unchurched, they're unreached, and they're unengaged. But they have the same kind of struggles that people that go to church do. They're struggling with everything, again, from loneliness, PTSD, anger, addiction. And so we came up with a very simple 3-step process for reaching them. And it's right in this brochure we created. And it's called Relate, Share, and Disciple. And these people some of them are at their lowest point in life. They're going online looking for hope for whatever struggle that is. And they'll see Find Hope here, and they'll click on the ad. And they're taken to a page like you see in this first panel, where it says Find Hope, pick your struggle. And they click on the struggle, and they're taken to a landing page like you see in the center panel. In this case, it's our first ad, Hope for Loneliness. At the landing page, we address their struggle and we introduce them to Jesus. And then we give them a simple, easy to understand 4-step gospel presentation. They get down to the bottom of the page, and there is a prayer of salvation. And should they choose to say that, they can click, yes, I said the prayer, and we can then follow up with them. So since January 1 of this year, 360,000 people have gone to a page like you see in the center panel, and 50,000 of them have given their life to the Lord. Now, when they give their life to the Lord, we have a 4-step discipleship process. They can have an opportunity to submit a prayer request. And the prayer requests that we get are similar to what Larry was talking about with Jay Frank. He's one of our prayer partners. And they will submit prayer requests, and we have prayer partners that reply to them. And these are some of the most gut-wrenching prayers you have ever seen. I put 4 of them right below the table on this insert. You're going to see there's a correction officer who has PTSD that's writing in because of the things he has seen in prison. We've received a prayer request from a 14-year-old girl that's addicted to pornography and doesn't know where to turn. And there's also a lady who's an ex-con who has just been through so much, she has no more hope. These are the type of prayer requests we're seeing every day. And we're so blessed to have people that sit down and respond to these folks. We also don't know if they have a Bible, so we give them an opportunity to download a YouVersion. That's what's on my phone, and give them a YouVersion app. We have a 7-day plan for new believers, which jumpstarts their faith journey. And one question we always get is, how are you going to get them in church? And if you think about the digital journey I just took you on, they're online looking for hope. they see a gospel presentation, they give their life to the Lord online, they submit a prayer request. It's all going on online. So we thought, why don't we help these people from 50 states, and they're coming to us from all over the country, experience Christian community? And so what we do, we partner with churches and use their live streams so that people that aren't going to church can experience church. And they're clicking on live streams, they're seeing worship services, they're hearing messages, and they're growing in their faith. And that's what we do. So there are, this year, through the end of this year, we're planning on seeing about 60,000 decisions from Christ for people that are coming to our website. Next year, our goal is 100,000 people. And I'm sure we're going to hit it because there is that many people out there looking for hope. Millions of people every day going online looking for hope for their struggles. And we are there 24/7, 365 days a year to share a message of hope and introduce Jesus into their lives. And we do that because we live for Jesus and we love people. And whoever these people are, whether they know it or not, he's the one they've been looking for. So I want to thank you all today for your attention. If anybody has a question, Pat or myself would be happy to answer that. Yeah.
If Watford here, would he tell anything about this interaction with Steve Jobs? Like, they think Steve Jobs, what's that?
He seems to think that he did towards the end. Some of the things he heard about. He wasn't there when.
Question.
The question is Steve Jobs in heaven? And Walt had a very close relationship with Steve. The way Walt told it is that Steve's sister was in the room when Steve passed away. And there seems to be an indication that he did.
You talk more about when this was, like, did he bring the Bible and did he talk about God and Jesus at work?
Steve?
Walt.
Walt. I know that he was pretty forthcoming in his faith at work. And of course, he witnessed to Steve Jobs. He gave him a Bible. He said, you need to read the first 4 Gospels. And I think Steve did, and he had it all figured out. But also at the same time, Steve was traveling with the Beatles and going on a variety of different sojourns.
I believe.
Anyone else? Well, good. Well, let me encourage you to take the insert with you, the brochure. If you have any questions, our contact information is at the bottom, email, phone number. We're located up in Brentwood. Please give us a call, stop by our office so you know that we're not operating out of the trunk of our car. And it's really good to see you all, and hope that you'll get in touch with us and find out more about what we do. Thanks.
So,